I'm turning recording on. I want to wish everybody good evening. Welcome to the May 19th Electric Railroaders Zoom meeting. I'd like to make a few announcements before I introduce our speaker. First of all, as Tom Vandergrift just mentioned, we do have space still available on our Pacific Northwest tour, which will include Portland, Oregon, Yakima, Washington, and Seattle, Washington's July 6th through 11. The bookings close June 3rd. You can see more information on erausa.org. It's erausa.org. I'm sure you also saw the announcement on the website of the SIR, Staten Island Railway, tour of the Clifton Shop. That is now sold out. There are no further spaces, so don't send money. We have made an announcement. We've made an announcement to that effect on the website. And that's that. Let's see, what else? If those of you who are online tonight, if you're not currently a member, we try to get as many people to participate in the Zoom meeting as possible. We do not have a paywall, but there are expenses in producing the bulletin, in paying for our Zoom capabilities so we can host a lot of people. We have an excellent monthly newsletter called The Bulletin and a feature magazine once a year. Member dues are $60 for the electronic bulletin and print headlights. If you are ages 30 and under, you can get that same subscription for $30 a year. And all print subscription is $110 a year. In terms of other announcements, I've been asked to make an announcement on behalf of the East Penn Traction Club, and Rich Allman and Mike Junod, Junod, are both online. You can send direct questions if you had. The 2023 East Penn Traction Club meet continues on Saturday, May 20th, 2023 at the Agriplex at the Allentown, Pennsylvania Fairgrounds. The doors open to the public at 8 a.m. Admission at the door, $25. On Sunday, there will be a trolley layout open house. Info available at registration. ERA extends a welcome to all the East Penn meet attendees who are at tonight's Zoom meeting. The other announcement, the reminder, is there will be a SEPTA trip sponsored by Friends of Philadelphia Trolleys. I don't know if there are tickets still left. I assume you can Google the website for more information. Other important detail is next month's meeting, which will be the last meeting before we take off for 2 months for the summer, will be Friday, June 16th, 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time. It will be a very special new presentation by historian Harvey Lehner. Harvey Lehner is also online tonight, Laner, and he's put together a dialogue and very rare video footage that he produced with his friend Ralph Cantos, a tour of traction systems throughout US and Canada from the mid-60s. And those of you from Chicago here, I know the beginning of that includes a lot of Chicago 1960s footage, but basically any major city operating electrified rail, commuter, metro, light rail, trolley bus will be featured in that show. And there are details on the erausa.org website. So with that, yeah, it was a question by Leonard Batchelder. Yes, tonight's program that Ray DeGroote is about to present will be recorded. It is being recorded right now. It will be available on the website on the link ERA-TV. So ERA-TV. It'll probably be on between 7 to 14 days. So you just keep checking the website and eventually you'll see a link to that presentation. All right. At this time, I want to introduce our speaker, who's right here ready. It'll be presented by Ray DeGroote, ERA member 1009. He's a native Chicagoan. Ray joined ERA 1946 at the age of 16 and is a board member of the Central Electric Railfans Association. Ray will show a collection of rarely seen views, many in color, of 7 Canadian interurban systems, which continued service well into the 1950s, long after most comparable American operations had ceased operation. This presentation will include favorites such as the London Port Stanley with its former Milwaukee electric cars. The Montreal and Southern Counties Railway will also be covered. Little remains of these magnificent Canadian systems reside in Transit Museum, which will also be covered. In his career, Ray has traveled extensively to 50 distinct countries to observe and photograph their operations. He's also written several articles, transit publication, collaborated on 4 Japanese light railway handbooks. He brings long years and extensive knowledge of passenger and freight transportation to tonight's show. And before I turn the show over to Ray, I want to give a shout out to Central Electric Railfans partner, Chicago Association Management, who has provided the Zoom link up that Ray is in their offices and presenting that. And 2 other things, please hold your questions to the end. If you want, you can post them in the chat and perhaps someone in the chat will answer. Otherwise, you want to make sure they are answered. Make sure you stay to the end. Presentation is about 2 hours long. There will be a mid-program break at the request of the presenter. With that, Ray, show is yours. You can share the screen and go forth.
Share the screen for you.
Okay, all right, we're ready to go. Why?
Ready to go.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here. This is the first Zoom program I've given, so we're going to have a good show tonight. Now, I should tell you more. First off, sitting with me is John Asplin from the poke your head in, from the management company, and behind him is John Nicholson from CERA. Is he going to get his? There he is. You know John because John has been running the CERA Zoom programs now for, well, gosh, well over a year now at this stage. And this particular program we gave for CERA back in October of last year, but it wasn't a Zoom, it was just an in-person show. But we kept it, it's on PowerPoint. So we thought that when Bob Newhouser asked me to do it, I said, fine, that sounds good. Now the idea came up, as I say, back in October when John and I were talking about it. And I said, well, yeah, we can pull something together. I got enough slides of Canada through the years. It just happened to be the time that Queen Elizabeth died. And so I thought, well, we'll put a little tribute to the Queen in the program as it relates to Canada. As it turns out that I actually was in Ottawa on the day of the coronation in 1953 of the Queen. It wasn't planned that way, but it happened that way, which is good. And that we had better weather than they had in London. And in Ottawa, we had a fly past of jet planes. Remember, in 1953, jet planes were still something kind of new here, you know. So the crowd was very, very pleased about that. Well, ironically, the coronation in London had bad weather over there, and we had gorgeous weather here in Chicago after all these years. So you will see some of those later. Now, the program itself, geographically, will go from west to east. We're going to start at the British Columbia Electric Railway and end up all the way over at the Quebec Railway Light and Power Company. Then after those will show you scenes, what we could find of what is still around, what's left to see today around the various parts of the country. Why start with British Columbia? Well, British Columbia was the first interurban that I ever saw. I saw it when I was 17 years old. In Chicago, we had in those years mid-year graduation. Some people graduated in mid-year after from high school, and I was one of them. But I was going to Northwestern at Evanston, and that quarter system, so I had about 6 or 7 weeks to do nothing. And my father at the time worked for an intercoastal steamship company, went from New York and East Coast to the West Coast and the Gulf ports to the West Coast. And I said one night, well, why don't you put me on one of the company ships and I'll go for a trip? And the New York vice president said, yeah, let Little Ribbon go on a trip. So we did, and we went down from Chicago to New Orleans on the Illinois Central Panama Limited. We had a little bit of Mardi Gras before I got on the ship. And then the ship itself went all the way through the canal up the West Coast to Los Angeles, Terminal Island, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. Then, and I came home by train, but in the meantime, the purser on the ship was my watch guard, my bodyguard. He said, would you like to go to Canada? Victoria and Vancouver. I said, sure. He said, well, we'll take the overnight boat to Victoria and then spend the day there, and then take the ferry boat across to Vancouver in the afternoon. And we spent the next day in Vancouver, and then came back down to Seattle by bus. Well, okay, remember now the time, this is 1948, and I began to think, what documentation did I use to get out of the country, or even better, get back in the country? I had no passport, I had no voting card, but all I could come up with is my high school cafeteria pass, which is expired anyway, and my Chicago Surface Lines, or Chicago Transit Authority by that time, a card to ride for half fare as a student for all of 3 sets. Well, anyway, so we went and got out okay. Coming back at the border, I had to tell them who I was, and they wanted to be sure, and they played the old X, Y, I can't take, the old joke about the alphabet. The customs guy, immigration guy said, how do you pronounce what are the last 3 letters of the alphabet? And I blurted out XYZ. He says, fine, you're an American. If you'd been Canadian, you would have said Z. And everyone got a big laugh out of the thing. So we keep that in mind. And John Nicholson reminded me of that. I did that stunt once again. You'll see Dick Andrews later on in the picture in the show. He and I went to the London and Port Stanley from Detroit across to Windsor. Same thing coming back. I don't know how I got back in. By the time I went to Toronto, though, in '53, then I, of course, could vote by that time. So I had a voter's card because I didn't have a first passport until '53. Okay. Now, when I got out there at this age, I've been an ERA member now for 2 years, and I had picked up some of the earlier volumes of headlights, but I didn't get all the ones. I know Bob was asking for some of the very early ones, and now I don't have those. I have them just back a few years. But I was beginning to learn about these transit lines, learn that they're all being abandoned and buses are taking over and all that. And I knew some things to do to be sure. For example, when I was in San Francisco, to see the 4 tracks on Market Street and to see the Council Crest line at Portland. And in Vancouver, I knew about the Chilliwack interurban line, but frankly, there was just a couple of trips a day on that, 3 trips or so. And I just didn't have the time for that, much less than the money. The interurban cash is getting a little bit short by this time. It was a long trip. So everything worked out on K. The pictures you're going to see are mine, basically, but the other people have helped me and given me pictures through the years. The earlier ones, the very first ones from British Columbia, are from a fan, Robert McVeigh, for whom I confess I've lost track of. I don't know where he is. But anyway, those pictures are all taken BCC, or before color camera. I got my Argus C3 camera in 1953, once I started a regular full-time job, and I could afford it. And of course, Argus is made in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as I recall, and I still got the thing. It's a brick. And if I ever take it back, I don't do it anymore, but I did take it to Europe a number of times for a second camera. And the customs people want to see what this great big brick is that I had to carry through. So, but it worked. It was a good camera. So if you hear BCC, that means it was the picture I took before I got the color camera. Now, we should thank right now John Nicholson, among others, but John especially, for color scanning all the slides to begin with, but color correcting them, some of which needed a lot of work, including the Lake Erie Northern Grand River. If you took pictures back in the 55 era, you may use ectochrome, but we didn't know at the time that ectochrome would turn red, and it did. But you'll see that John did a fantastic job of color correcting all that stuff. So we thank him for that. The major reference for this well, we can't see it now, we'll show you in a minute, was the Hilton and Dew book, The Electric Interurban Railways in America. And it actually, each company was reviewed, but toward the back was a Canadian section. And that's basically where most of this stuff comes from, was from the Hilton and Dew book, to which we should give credit. If you don't have a copy, you find it on an estate sale or eBay or something, pick it up. It's a very worthwhile reference to have in your collection. And one more tribute to Canada, when the picture comes on, I'm wearing a tie, tie that comes from the Halton Railway Museum in Toronto. It's got a red Decro streetcar. And someone said, it's a Chicago car. And I said, no, I guarantee it's a Toronto car. I bought it in the museum some years ago. I think the ties were made in England. I don't think any more are left. So some last remarks now about Canadian interurbans themselves. They actually developed kind of along the same lines that our US interurbans, but they never did come up with any big, large integrated company. Although they had 25 companies, and the peak mileage was about 850 miles, half of which was in Ontario. Most of the interurbans were isolated from each other. They weren't really connected. In Canada, the term for interurbans is the radial railway instead of interurban. So keep in mind, radial railway. And the first line itself was the Thorold St. Catharines route, which Niagara and St. Catharines to Toronto Railway in 1887, 2 years built, 2 years, 1887, 2 years before US started to build them. But Canadian built a few lines actually after the US quit building interurbans, after the peak. There are some distinctive features. One is the extensive government ownership of the interurbans, like the Canadian National Railway, Canadian Pacific, which is rather rare, and some municipal ownerships, rather rare in the US. The early emphasis was on carload freight to keep them financially running. They didn't have any big rate wars that we had in this country with the mainline railroads. And generally, the interurbans had long lives. More than half of the original mileage was still had passenger service in 1946 after World War II. But of course, after that, it declined rapidly, just like in our own country. Most of the interurban cars were built by the Preston Car Company, Preston Car and Coach, which later was a Brill subsidiary, or the Ottawa Car Company. And lightweight cars were almost unknown, except at the end of the Windsor, Essex, and Lake Shore. They had some beautiful cars, which you will see. Let's get back on some pictures finally. Finally, pictures. Okay, as I said, it's a CERA program, but it's PowerPoint. One thing about PowerPoint is, of course, you can't change it. If there are any mistakes, we apologize. We should have put some other stuff in, but we didn't quite make it. So here's the feature presentation. And that was, as you saw that on the website, that was announcing the program. Of course, Montreal and Southern Counties. Here are more people to thank, besides John and John here. People, I'm sure you will see some of those names. You'll see George Grambles, you'll see Joseph Kenfield, Gary Dillon. I'm sure you know many of those people. And Richard Glaze from Toronto now. William Hoffman, a very good personal friend in Chicago, who helped endow the trolleybus garage at the Illinois Railway Museum. Nice tribute to him. As I say, we did this right before the Queen died. So here's a picture of the St. Edward Crown in Toronto. I'm not sure if it's Hudson Bay Company or Eaton, to tell the truth. But in 1953, I thought that came out pretty well. So it's in this program now. We can't take it out. As I say, I was in Ottawa. This is the Parliament building in Ottawa on the day of the coronation. You see, it was gorgeous weather. People were enjoying themselves. big crowd, of course. As I say, the jets flew over and everyone was in awe by the noise. So now here we go from the west coast of Vancouver, Victoria, all the way across to Quebec. I don't have any pictures of, there were a couple of lines in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, but I don't have any of that. I'm sorry, they were long gone. Okay, I can't. There's no. You see that you know where they're all show up there. So we start with British Columbia Electric Railway, which here now John has made also in addition to scanning, he made some maps and these title slides. I think we did determination dates. The Vancouver Chilliwack got rid of passenger service there in 1950, but became diesel. The New Westminster Burnaby Lake, we'll see on the map coming up. You see the 1953. Then little by little downtown to Marpole in 1952. Then the Marpole. Oops, I did something. I hit something.
Oh,
That was me. My mistake. Marpole to New Westminster in 1956, and the last one, Marpole to Stevenson in 1958. The reason it lasted as long as it did was because the roads out that way were so inadequate at the time that they really needed the trains for freight service. Now here's the map. Let's see if we can do this. Vancouver, you see Vancouver at the far left. Okay. And Vancouver to New Westminster is here. And then the long Chilliwack line, whoops, coming out all the way. It touches briefly the US border before it goes up to Chilliwack. That's 65 miles long itself. Right now, you see where Cloverdale is. We will mention Cloverdale later on in the presentation. Here's a Burnaby Lake line that got quit early. And the Marpole New Westminster line, a low freight branch. And then here's the last one, Marpole to Stevenson. All right. They all were built well back in the around turn of the century. Now, BCER actually was a British company formed in 1897. Did not become a Canadian company until 1927. Now, I mentioned to you that I went to Victoria. This is the only streetcar I guess you're going to see, but that's the purser on the ship. So I had to give him, it's an old black and white picture that I took. I made a slide out of the negative that I had from my father's camera. As I said, I was only about 17 years old. I didn't have much, and they certainly didn't have much money, so very little film, but it was good. So thanks to him, we got up to BCER. Typical Chilliwack line, Interurban from downtown station, and of course, obviously carrying the Royal Mail. These early pictures are Bob McVeigh's. That I guess they could be duplicates, but they're certainly beautifully preserved. Whatever film he used, and then it'll become some mine will show up here. Now, by the way, that was crossing the Fraser River. Now we're out on the Chilliwack line itself. But there are only about 3 trains a day, I think, or 3 or 4. And frankly, I wanted to ride the streetcars in Vancouver that day. That was my big thing. So something had to get sacrificed. This is at Chilliwack itself. Some of these cars, I'm trying to find where the roster is, were built by the company. The company is very good at building cars, or some were built by St. Louis Car Company. That'll pop up later on. They actually had a pretty big system. They had 72 passenger cars. They had 14 express motors and baggage. They had 16 electric locomotives. Mainly the locomotives were mainly Baldwin, but there's one oddball at least in the crowd. But today the freight service is run by, whatever's left, was run by the Southern Railway of British Columbia. Okay. By the way, you see in a minute here, I'll tell you, this is at Marpole, and you see a freight train in the background. This was the last bit of remnant, and I just got back to just in time before they quit to going out to. It wasn't that long a line. None of them were really that long. Marpole to Stevenson was only what? Where does it go here? Come on, it's here someplace. Well, it could have been more than about 15, 20 miles long. I've got it here somewhere. the line from Marpole into downtown Vancouver was mainly a private right of way, and it was a rather pretty line through a very nice neighborhood of Vancouver, which I think eventually got covered by one of their trolley bus lines. New Westminster was curious. The drugstore had a modernization program, or the building had a modernization program, but the interurban was still very important. So you see, it came through diagonally through the store, and here it comes. Rather unusual track where you see some older track in the foreground. And that's again just going on along the freight line to New Westminster. Again, crossing the Fraser River. Looks like a highway is being built in the background, left. Now we made it out to Stevenson. Service was frequent enough, but even so, I just stayed on the car and come on back in. I was on short time whenever I took these. There's that freight train you saw earlier. And hanging out the vestibule window. I think the oddball locomotive is this one here, or no, maybe the next one, by Dick Kerr Company of England, which, as I say, is rather unusual that they have one of those from such a long way away. And that's what's coming, unfortunately. As I say, it was dieselized. And there are the 2 new units, or 3 units there that had already arrived. Well, that's the Dick Kerr unit right there. That's a 962, 982. This is at the Kitsilano shops, which is the big shops on the southern part of town, where they did all their work and stored all their cars. And I think it's underneath the Granville Street Bridge, or it's one of the bridges anyway, in the background. Notice some PCC cars over there at the right. Let's see a couple more. Vancouver had 36 PCCs. 1 came in 1938, 3 came in 1941, and then 32 came in the years between 1948 at 46 and 44 and 45. They obviously didn't last. They quit. The Vancouver city cars quit in 55. Some were scrapped, but some had the doors and the motors were put in some Vancouver trolley buses, and some of the wheels actually went to Pittsburgh, and the motors went to Toronto. Motors of the cars. You see, they had quite a display of equipment, no question about that. Now on to Winnipeg, I didn't see the interurbans in Winnipeg. There was one. It was the Winnipeg, Selkirk, and Lake Winnipeg from 1903 to 1939, 20 miles long, and with a 20-mile branch of all things out to a place called Stonewall. The Winnipeg Electric Company ran the streetcar system from 1891 to 1955. And they had a huge number of lines all over the place. They claim 140 track miles. Could well be, I guess. Anyway, they put that in just represent Vancouver, Winnipeg. And they were the last two. The Portage and the other were the last 2 lines. This is a picture of Dick Andrews, of all people. Some of you may know Dick from the Detroit area. And you know, rail fans will take pictures from any and almost all angles you can think of. Here we are in Denver, I forget the year now, but we rented a car. I guess we needed the car to go to Fort Collins. But we're at the museum. Now I forget the name of the museum. It's not the Platte Railway, but anyway, the big museum near downtown Denver, with him taking a picture of something. And I don't know what he took the picture of, but Dick Andrews and I have been friends since back, oh gosh, in the early 40s, because he and I both collected streetcar and bus transfers. And that's how we became good friends for all these years. Unfortunately, he died now a few years ago. So we'll take a look at the London Port Stanley, where you see passenger service ended in February of 1957. Now the LNPS was about, how many miles? Now why don't I have that here? Well, anyway, it was about 24 miles. Oh, here it says so, 22 miles, yeah. Okay, or 24 to Port Stanley. it started. It's a very early start. It went back where was it? It had steam. It had steam operation in its very earliest days, and finally it was electrified. And then what they did actually was they got the city owned them. They got rid of another parallel interurban, which wasn't doing so good, and they built this. Let's see if I can tell you what we went from Detroit to St. Thomas, which is at the top, is 112 miles. So it's not that you could do that at a day trip. That worked out okay. We did show the train connection, Michigan Central and St. Thomas, and the Wabash looked like St. Thomas, and the Pere Marquette south of St. Thomas, all the big connections. And probably up at London must have been the Canadian National. I can't imagine. Maybe Canadian Pacific. We'll see. This is the fan trip that somebody organized. I don't know who, back in the early 50s. This is not my picture, but I know people who were there. But those are the two Milwaukee cars. That the two of the three. I guess they actually had three. One got scrapped eventually, with the white flags, as you see, for extra service. Same trip, little tiny shaky. Now here's some of the regular cars. The curious thing about the London and Port Stanley was they numbered the trailers in odd numbers and the passenger cars in even numbers. So for example, the passenger cars 2 and 4 were Jewetts of 1915. They were coaches. And then 6, 8, and 10, more Jewetts, combines. 12 and 14 were Jewetts of 1917. And 16 and 18 were Coleman cars from 1909, but they got over to the Appleton, Wisconsin for the Wisconsin Traction Light Heat and Power Company, big mouthful. But it is curious that the few Jewett cars actually went abroad anyway, or went to another country anyway. And the LNPS almost had all Jewett cars to begin with. Now the trailers, let's see what we got here. We'll give you a look at. The trailers 1, 3, and 5 were Preston built cars, 1915. The 7, 9, and 11 were St. Louis cars, 1908. And then the others, 13, 15, 17, 19, were various companies. They were steam railroad coaches that they dragged around, although they did rebuild them for MU operation. And 21 was a Coleman from 1909. Again, went to Appleton, Wisconsin, came back to the Milwaukee Electric as their 1129 in 1924, came to London Port Stanley in 1941, and it came back to the Illinois Railway Museum in 55. You'll see it later on. This is probably down by St. Thomas, or Port Stanley. And freight service, again, kept them going. They had, let's see, what is this? I think that's St. Louis. No, it can't be. It's something else. Or like this poor old boxcar. It looks like all wood. One good windstorm, it's going to fall apart. Poor thing. All right, we go to Grand River Railway at Lake Erie Northern, and you see both of them ended passenger service in April of '55. They were practically like twin companies. They interchange stuff back and forth. There's really no difference. But the Grand River Railway, let's take a look at the map. The Grand River Railway connected Galt in the center north to Waterloo-Kitchener with the branch from Preston to Hespeler. And you know, Waterloo-Kitchener now has a new light rail line all itself. Then the Lake Erie Northern went south from Galt to Port Dover. And as they say, when you see the pictures, you'll see that the equipment was all interchangeable. It's all standard gauge. It's all a good freight service. Steam started in, the Galt to Preston was 1894 with 25 miles. By the way, they're all Canadian Pacific subsidiaries. They all merged in 1918, really. They the Grand River Railway converted from 600 volts to 1500 in 1921, which is somewhat unusual. Lake Erie Northern was steam in 1911, but finally became a CP subsidiary, electrified in 1916 at 1500 volts. It's 51 miles down to Port Dover. Okay, let's take a look at this. The checkerboard pattern was devised by the Canadian Pacific as a means of better recognition of the cars. And dark, gloomy weather, what you see here, is what we had that day. Because George Crandall and Bill Jansen and Joe Canfield, the four of us were there together. It was dreary, to say the least. And Ectochrome was supposed to help, but of course it all turned red. So you'll see different combinations. Sometimes they had larger combines and just smaller passenger compartments. And you can look for 626. 626 over to the right. It pops up any number of times. Is the last interurban car built in North America. It was completed at the Preston shops in March of 1948. So it's quite an honor to be, the last interurban. The other 864, these 800 class cars allegedly were actually looked at by the South Shore Railroad in Chicago in 1956, and they were deemed really deemed too slow, although they could have used them on the Chicago Gary plug runs. But they put in a bid, I'm told. The passenger traffic manager was a friend, as well as a good rail fan, and good to rail fans. He said they put in a bid, but it got rejected. But the 800s got scrapped anyway, so I don't know what else was going on. There's various scenes of the equipment. This is Lake Erie Northern that built this, all steel. That would have been a good title slide. 622 was the Express Combine, no passengers. They all date for that same era after the war. This is in Brantford, coming underneath, I think. They're probably their station. And we made it down what? Do we make it to where do we make it on here? Waterford. That, I think, the tall fellow next to the semaphore, I think is Joe Canfield. A lot of you people will recognize that name if you don't know him from being an author of any number of books, including the CERA TM book on Milwaukee. Funny thing about this one was so bad, the color was so terrible that John said, we just make it a black and white and let it go. Couldn't help it. We're coming across one of the railroads. They had good coverage, covering all the different connections that they made. I think we decided that this was New York Central, New York Central. Port Dover. You could tell that the Ectochrome was on this one. Couldn't help it, just one of those things. There's 626 again. It pops up here. It was hard putting all this together to figure out all the different numbers close up, but so we maybe had too many of this, but it's a classic car. And finally, we made it all the way to Kitchener. They did run good freight trains. In fact, I think it was John Dew said that the Grand River was the most profitable freight railroad of the interurbans. It made loads of money. That's coming off at Preston, where the Preston Car Company was. I didn't realize that until I saw the flag there in the background, the old flag, their old flag. Now, some of those, by the way, went to the Mason City Clear Lake. We'll show those later on. Okay, let's move on to the Niagara, St. Catharines, and Toronto, which was the Canadian national subsidiary. John shows you the dates of the ending. Actually the St. Catharines Niagara Falls line, I think, actually had an earlier closure and then resumed just to keep during the war years, and then it did finally get abandoned. Port Duluth in 50. The very last one was the Thorold Port Colborne line there you see in March of 1959. Here's a really good map of this. This is nice. Niagara on the Lake branch at the far right top was gone very early. The two Port Duluth lines were each side of the channel, and then Thorold to Niagara Falls was gone after it quit once and it come back, and it finally ended. The very last service was Thorold to Port Colborne, which we said ended when? What did we say? I forget. Thorold Port Colborne was 18 miles and it ended in 1957. Now, interestingly enough, we were there for a fan trip, which you're going to see, on July 4th, 1957. Oops, what happened? What did I do? We did something. We from Chicago had taken an overnight train and got there the next morning, July 4th. We brought the news that afternoon, that noon before, the Chicago Aurora and Elgin had quit. Just like that, it quit, leaving people stranded downtown. So it was quite a situation for people trying to get home after all that. Anyway, that was kind of a sad trip. The railroad itself was a nice railroad to ride. The car 130 was a beautiful car, but it had kind of a checkered history at the end. Let me tell you that history right now while we look at the car. Poor old 130. It went to the Rail City Museum at Sandy Point, New York, which I think was under the auspices of the Syracuse chapter of the NRHS. And then it got leased to the Connecticut Trolley Museum at Warehouse Point, but it was in poor condition already. And then it was parked, and they used the car for parts storage. They just sat there until August of 1970. There was a note in the Upper Canada Railway Society journal that says the car was scrapped at the McGee Transportation Museum in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. So it didn't say when it got scrapped or even how it got there, to that matter. But unfortunately, a gorgeous car like that, it made an unfortunate end. It did once be double as a two-man car. It was converted to one man, but you see there quite plainly how that fitted in. There's 130 down by Port Colborne. Or, yeah, I guess. All right, now, the reason I show you that is the line from Thorold to Port Colborne more or less parallels a canal connecting the two, the Welland Canal connecting Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And if I was there in 53, they were thinking about, they were beginning to build the St. Lawrence Seaway. But in those days, the lake freighters were still fairly small, and they couldn't carry too much tonnage. But anyway, there's a big bridge in the background there, and that's the bridge. And I guess I happened to go over there, and the bridge tender happened to see me and says, "Would you like to go for a ride?" Meaning in the bridge, because a ship was coming. And so I said, "Sure, why not?" So here we are up in the bridge, looking out on the ship that's heading south in the Welland Canal toward Lake Erie. Anyway, back to the trains. The 60s, what's that? 60, 80, that's 80. That's, I couldn't read the number. The 80 cars, they tell me, 82, and 83 came from the Cincinnati and Lake Erie. Okay, I can't prove that, but that's what they say. So we'll see. Now, we're making a meeting. Of course, in the old days, we rail fans could always talk to the motorman and watch the signals and what have you, read his train orders. And for the meet coming up, you got there first. Well, that was an opportunity for a photo stop, and they always complied. They were nice. Here's another one of those CLE cars. I guess 82 was on the line that day that some of these are different trips, by the way. They may not all be the same day. I took that in 53. Then they got the cars from the Windsor, Essex, and Lakeshore Railway. When did they get these things? They got these things in 1955. They went first to Montreal and Southern Counties. And then they came over here and eventually were scrapped in 59. Too bad, because they were nice cars. Built in 1930 by Ottawa Car Company. Very handsome looking cars. Now, I said the fan trip was run by Akron Railroad Club. Maybe some of you remember Gary Dillon. He was very active at the time, knew Gary for years and years and years. And they put the fan trip together. We found out about it again. In those days, even before social media and before internet, we managed to find out when these things are being held. So we have both cars on in and out. And the Canadian National color scheme doesn't do much good for the cars, but 82 eventually ended up, I guess, on the scrap heap too. A complete roster of all kinds of electric locomotives, because they did a good freight business with Canadian National. Nicely painted, just right for real fan photography. And I guess they did pull out church, because a couple of rail fans over on the right of the picture. Now, you know, when you're on a fan trip, you take pictures at any goofy location you could think of, not just one or two, but you cross the bridge, take the pictures all different areas. It takes all day, of course, but it's fun. And of course, they had a variety of equipment because it's a pretty big company when it was all running. Here's 83 again. I think these are fan trip pictures now. I suspect they were out making any little switch move, anything we could do that's different, just like a fan trip. Nice looking cars, though, really nice. Like everything is. It looks like even maybe a regular service car too in that picture. On the streets, probably St. Catherine. Look at all the fans over there. It tells us where we are at stop 6, so that's a good. And here comes the regular southbound, I think. Happily, all the slides themselves are individually marked and they're all dated, should that ever come up in conversation. Oh yeah, get back on the bridge again, yeah. Okay, we put Cornwall in here. Cornwall is not necessarily an interurban, but it's unique in one respect, and you'll see. You see, the streetcar service that ended in 49 has tracked the trolley service, which ended in 71. And so it's rather unusual. The engines themselves, he had a good strange roster. I can't tell the numbers anymore on the slide, but if it was 6, it's Ex-Caw Valley. If it's 8, it's the Aroostook Valley. 9 is Niagara Junction. 15 is the old Lake Erie Northern 335. They also had a line car that they got from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And supposedly, I guess they did have locomotive 14, which is Springfield Terminal Railroad, and also number 11. It's just too bad those numbers don't show up here on the Omaha, Lincoln, and Beatrice Railroad. The earliest one of these things came out, number 14, came out to the Illinois Railway Museum in 1972, and it's good workhorse. I tell you, the IRM that it really does a good job. You know, the old joke is every time they repair the tracks, watch out, they're going to abandon service. Now the big one, Montreal and Southern Counties. And this was fun to ride because they had so much different stuff and went to all the different places. It's hard to remember where all this stuff was. But anyway, you see the abandonments. Marieville in Granby, 1951, that's in the far outer end of the line. Then Montreal, downtown Montreal, or their terminal in Youville Street to St. Lambert was in June 15 of 55, mainly because they had to do work on the bridge over the St. Lawrence River because of the seaway construction. And then the final end, St. Lambert to Marieville there in October of 56. Let's see what else we've got here. Here's another beautiful map that John made that shows these different cities. And let's see if we can figure out if this works. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, this goes back into 1890. The whole company go back to 1897. So it's an old time company. The total length from Montreal on the left to well, you can't quite. You may have cut off the end there. At Granby was 47 miles, and this little branch here to Saint Angel was only about 3 miles long. We'll tell you more about that later. Anyway, it got to Longueuil up there at the very top in 1910, but that was cut off very early in the 30s. So Montreal South, curiously enough, if I get the story straight here, Montreal South is actually further north than Montreal North in Montreal is because of the shape, the angle of the cities. If you check a map, you'll see that it's at a very, very strange, goofy angle. So oddball stuff. Anyway, the MNSC expanded some more. It got to St. Lambert in 1909. Then you can see where Richelieu is. Here's Richelieu and the Richelieu River. It got that far in 1913. Then it went out here. Where's my pointer? I lost it again. Okay. It went out to Saint. I can't pronounce it. Césaire on May 1914, and then the line was built to Abbotsford. Here's Abbotsford over here to the right in 1915 to Granby in 1916 with plenty through service, and then this line to Saint Angel was a central Vermont line which they electrified all 3.5 miles. They must have some industry out there or something that they wanted to do. The peak year for all this was 1947 after World War II. And the decline set in then. The Marieville Granby section here on the far outer end was dieselized as early as 1951. But oddly enough, Granby itself had passenger service, regular train passenger service from downtown Montreal straight to Granby. Nothing connected with the Interurban at all. The Montreal to St. Lambert, as I say, was work on the bridge over the St. Lawrence River.
Which bridge?
The Victoria Bridge over the St. Lawrence River. Yeah, that knocked out. So then they tried to run from St. Lambert out to McKayville and St. Lambert to Montreal South, and that didn't quite make it. You'll see a picture in a minute here. But the Interurban Division, well, they quit that in 56. So let's take a look at some pictures. They had anything and everything running around it, and to have a roster of this, we hear all night. But this is the downtown Montreal terminal. As I recall, if I get this straight, there was a single track to the Victoria Bridge to get across the river with one passing siding. Now, half this stuff, in fact, 90% is never coupled with each other. So if you're running a single car train and you only have one passing track, you're going to run in convoy. Of course, you got the incoming crowd coming in to be the next batch. They all, regular railroad, they all had to carry their extra section flags and make the proper tuning signals. So it was like a musical parade, toot, 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 as they keep passing each other back and forth. If you did it, it was kind of fun. This is before recordings were made, unfortunately. Classic Interurban, if there ever was any, that's for sure. 602, by the way, is the National Steel Car of Ottawa, very unusual, 1913. They built about 605, 603 and 4. And then if you see 606, 7, 8, 9, and 10, were all Ottawa car companies. So again, changes. This is the Victoria Bridge over the St. Lawrence. It shares tracks with the Canadian National. The car on the bridge here is one of the Port Dalhousie cars, we'll call it, but it's at least secondhand from somewhere. I forget which cars they were. They were either in Trenton, New Jersey first, and then Alexandria, Virginia, or vice versa, before they got up here to the Niagara at St. Catharines, before they got to Montreal. So you see, roster people go crazy with these stuff. The general scene now at St. Lambert, where they had to turn and go back out to Montreal South, and then continue on mainline to Marieville and Granby. The people were very, very friendly, very nice. They were always very accommodating. At least I had no problem. Look at all that stuff. A collection of everything. The 12 in the middle there is ex-Oshawa little streetcar. And what else did we see? We got some trailers in there. The collection of stuff, a lot of which never ever coupled together. There's a later view of the same spot in sunshine. Yay, finally. There's 608. 608 was Ottawa of 19. Well, that was 1917. And we saw 602 earlier. National Steel Car, 1913. And the Oshawa car, I don't know who. Oh, the Oshawa car. That's the one from Trenton. I beg your pardon. The others came from Alexandria right to Niagara St. Catharines. Here is a ex-Trenton, New Jersey car. They painted up the other one of the run on the right, didn't they? Nice looking. And they had all sorts of different work equipment and freight equipment and mail express equipment scattered all over the place. This is all around St. Lambert. Now, as I say, when they cut back the electric service to the St. Lambert side, they had to connect. So this little station was put in here for the transfer between the CN trains and the Montreal and Southern counties. So here's a couple you see making the transfer. It, of course, was inconvenient. You know that. I mean, anytime people have to change, they're reluctant to do so. Witness the CANE in Chicago. Service is frequent, though. Now, this picture, I got to show you this. This was taken by friend Tom DeNoyer, oh gosh, back in 1950, with, I have a hunch, even Ensco film. You see, you can see that it's not the greatest picture, but just the mere historic value that here's the guy who took that picture back when he was only in about 18 himself at the time. And an Oshawa car. And now we're at Montreal South, which has a kind of a balloon type loop here for cars, although they were double-ended. We had rail fan weather, but it looks like the sun came out finally. That's good. These are all, I think, fan trip pictures, part of it, which you'll see in a minute. .607 was one of those Ottawa car companies, which probably was 1917. Now we're at Marieville, which is on the main line out to Granby. I think that's probably the turnback car that turned them around. And one of the Windsor cars. Look at all that lumber over there on the left. That'll look good for construction work. Some freight revenue. Oh, poor thing. I don't even know what 500 is. It was out there in the weeds. You know, it wasn't going to last much longer. Not up there in that weather. The 610 was Ottawa car 1922, the late arrival. That's Fan Trip, obviously, with the white flag. I think you'll get a kick out of the next one. Oh, not quite, not yet. So that's the one we used in the website or in the program announcement. Well, of course, remember, this is the Richelieu River. Remember, when you have fan trips, you take pictures every 10 feet. So here we're coming across the canal. It was good of the Brantford crowd to arrange this tram trip. Again, like I say, we found out about it and enough people could get up there. And by train too, we weren't using airlines yet to any extent. This, I think, is out at Saint Angel, that little Canadian, central Vermont branch line. The track looks like it's seen better days. And at Marieville again. I said Marieville the other day, that was Mackayville, sorry about that. Yeah, this is the Richelieu River. The other was a canal, so I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the one. We crept across this bridge, and I think more film got expended here. Kodak stock must have gone up that day. Here we come. Even I got carried away with it never. But it was a gorgeous day. A gorgeous car, what the heck. This is a place called MNSC Junction. And I'm not sure, oops, that's the one, I wanted to show you that with all the good luck we got when the steam engine shows up with this Canadian national emblem on the tender. And where are we now? I'm not sure where we are. Tell you, they're all, oh, it's Montreal and South, I guess. As I say, they're all labeled. Each one, they all got dates on them. All the slides. Now here's the group mixture: the Canadian fellas and the Brantford guys. And I know the gentleman at the far left, the tall gentleman, is Tony Clegg from Montreal, and the fourth one over, a little shorter, a little heavier, is Omer Lavillier. Names you may recognize from either publications or from your own trips up there, because they were very gracious hosts to any of us older people who ever knew them and met them. It was always good for some sort of laugh. The two of them were always playing tricks on the Americans, especially. So it was all right. It was good fun. Now, if anybody else recognizes anybody else, fine. I'd be curious who some of them are. Some of them could still be living today. Why not? But it was a good group. Tony Clegg is the second from the left, and Omer is the third from the right. And the others could be Canadian fellows, I think, not the Brantford crowd, because I think they set the whole trip up. Okay, we're off now to the last property, the Quebec Railway Light and Power Company, which itself goes back to the steam days. Notice that the passenger service ended in '59, and I'm sure the Canadian National kept a lot of the freight service even after the end of electric service. People think this is that famous hotel in Quebec City. No, that's the post office. And while it thinks it looks like the hotel, that's the post office, which is practically next door. They were all kind of compact there in the central area of Quebec City. We'll call it Quebec City. And the Quebec Railway Light and Power electrified about 25 miles out to a place called Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré, and then the last few miles to Saint-Joachim. But they have a short turn service to a place called Montmorency Falls, 6 miles from Quebec City. That part was still a double track. We'll take a look at the different, here again, they had all kinds of stuff, a lot of it dating from the steam era. And you'll recognize a few of the fact that the trailer there itself is from obviously the steam days. And they were famous for its stub switches, which you don't find very often. There were few in spots in Iowa that had. Some of the Iowa interurbans had it. But this was taken by Bill Hoffman, a good friend of CERA and mine for years and years. You see, the hotel is in the background up there. That's the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa City, and we're very close to the center city, and not too far actually from the river. All of these were 1953. Nice car. The 400s were 1930 built by Ottawa Car Company, and 454, which you'll see eventually here, it did go to Seashore. As I say, Montmorency Falls was the turnback. It was 6 miles out, and they had a loop to go back into the city. The falls itself are quite pretty. Here you see them there with the silhouette of an old trailer. They weren't very big, but very pretty and very scenic. And you did, when you got up there, you will get a good view of the there's Montmorency Falls. Because their second big tourist attraction. The big tourist attraction was the Cathedral of Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré. There's a view looking down. This is if you know Chicago people, Don McBean. Don McBean took that picture years ago with the river in the background. Beautiful, just like a model railroad. And here we are at the St. Montmorency Falls. Now we're at Saint Anne de Beaupré. The shrine itself goes back to, well, the shrine area goes back to 1658. The current building was done in the 20, I think it was finished in 29 or in the 20s. It actually suffered a fire. The previous cathedrals also suffered a fire, and today the Saint Anne de Beaupré was credited with many miracles of curing sick and disabled people. And at its peak season, tourist season, they had 500,000 passengers per year. A lot of it actually rode the railway in those days. Today they probably go by tourist bus. Pity. Let me quickly tell you more about these cars. Yeah, the 450s. 450s did the base service. Although when the heavy crowds showed up, they cut out all those old trailers. That's why they kept them. They had 6 motor cars of the 300 series and 4 of these 400s, or low 400s, and then more up to 412 in this series, and then the 450s, 5 of those, no, six of those, sorry, 1930 from Ottawa. And the old decorations, of course, remember the 1953, all the decorations were up for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth, so it was quite a nice time to be there for color. .401 looks pretty good there, I have to say. I may have written that. And we're at Saint-Joachim, which is as far out as the electric went. The mainline tracks continued further out to a place called Murray Bay, 86 miles up the St. Lawrence River. And I don't know how long that lasted, if it's still around or not. Look like pretty powerful electric locomotives. There's a train to Murray Bay. They must have several a day. And then they had to change, of course, at Saint-Joachim to diesels. This is not Saint Anne. We're back at the yard. I wonder what they're today. I bet they cleaned all this out. I bet it's all gone. It's been a long time since I've been up there. It's part of the 450 series. Now, is that a Canadian automobile? Is that what somebody said? It just happened to get out of the way. It wasn't meant to be there, but it got there anyway. Rail fan luck. Now, the next few pictures, the trailers, are actually at Steamtown in Bellows Falls. And Bill Hoffman took these some time ago. I don't know if they're still there or not. After all these years, it'd be hard to say. It could be You know that got a date for the steam days, no question about it. Let's look at the. Well, then I know it's for sure that's Bella Falls. Yeah, maybe the others are maybe in Quebec. Okay. Now, this is the seashore, isn't it? I think we maybe are at seashore. Let's see. The 454 got to seashore. And there it is in the better days. And I guess it's still there. Wouldn't know why not. Well, we're back still in Quebec. Okay. I told you earlier that some of the Lake Erie Northern Grand River electric locomotives went to the Mason City Clear Lake, which changed names along the way. It's the Iowa Terminal Railroad at the end now. And they also changed numbers a little bit. If we're correct, the 80 up front here is ex-Grand River Railway 236. And 81 is, I think, is behind it, is Lake Erie Northern 237. And they may still be running today. To the best of my knowledge, the Iowa terminal does switch cars in the early morning hours, I'm told, but it's been years since I've been out there. Now, there is one more locomotive. They never, we think this is the Grand River 228 out there in the weeds. And to the best of our knowledge, they never ever redid it. They just let it sit out in the weeds. And who knows, I don't know if it's still there or not. Now, I found this London and Port Stanley motor in Toronto in 1988. It was just off of Spadina, someplace near the lakefront. And I wonder if it's still, or how it was there to begin with, I don't know, or why it's there, or who's belonging. Never did find out. It's just curious as to what could have happened to the thing. Here's the other view of it. And then we go down to the Halton County Museum west of Toronto at their site, which is what? No, do I have the number of that one? It's either or I guess either 4 or 8. It's not numbered in this picture. Remember, the LNPS motor cars were even numbers. The trailers were odd numbers. Obviously, it's at Toronto. There's a PCC car at the right. Stained glass windows look nice here. Now, this is the Illinois Railway Museum, very early days when they had everything lined up there. We've got 1135 right in the foreground. Let's turn pictures here. I got to go back to London and Port Stanley to tell you. But this was actually 16 over at the London and Port Stanley. Now it's back in, the IRM painted it back into the TM colors. I like this lineup here. This is, I think, Nevada Northern on the right. Yes. Nevada Northern, open end obs. Then the TM car, ex-London Port Stanley. Obviously, Chicago L car. It might be right, 97? Okay. We think it's a 24. Okay. And then the little Burnley car at the right is a Illinois Burnley. That was the I guess clerk's house or in the St. Louis terminal at St. Louis 12th Street of the Illinois Terminal Railroad. It was down underneath the ground there for years and years and years, which is why it looked pretty good here. It's still, they're all still at the museum, but they've been moved around. They actually took the TM car inside, and that's where they found the big change. They thought it was the Mendota. Turns out that it was the Menominee. The paint had got all mixed up. So, but it's out there in good shape. And here's the London and Port Stanley. I'm sorry, Montreal and Southern Counties in service there at Halton County. Good, typical, classic interurban. With the MNSC signs, of course. They do run it. They had to change the gauge out there in the weeds, in the woods. I got to show you this picture now. You got to get a laugh at this one. It's obviously it's 107, and ready to take it all for a ride. There is Dick Glaze taking a picture of me, taking a picture of the car. at the music. So rail fans will do strange things, as you all know. It was kind of fun. Now we'll go back to Vancouver just briefly here as to remnant operations. Actually, a number of the BCER interurbans had been saved, and they were up at a place called Snoqualmie Falls, Washington, way up in the rainforest, I say, up there, damp and dreary. Look what it does to these cars out there. But it's a curious lineup. That's the BCER number, 1207 up front, built by St. Louis. Is that 1207? Well, 1207, St. Louis Car Company, 1905. Behind it is an Indiana Railroad car, and behind it are two master units from Yakima, Washington, which got saved. The two Yakima got saved back to Yakima, where we may see them if you come on the ERA trip now in July. But they did get them back in service, and this they took down up to Vancouver for service on a heritage line. And look what they did, how nice job they did. It's just a shame that this didn't last. This I took in July of 2002. It didn't last, only a couple of years. And it started in 1998, but it quit, it lasted longer than I thought. It quit in 2011. That's what I think it was. The line wasn't long. It was only about not quite 2 miles long, from the Granville Island to the Science World Museum. And unfortunately, they had to relocate because the major facility was going to be built on the railroad right away here. So it went out to that. It got to be a political issue finally. And of course, they finally closed it. And it's out at Cloverdale. But I mentioned earlier Cloverdale, about halfway out on the old Chilliwack line. So you can see what a nice job they did with this. It was kind of nice to ride it. You can see the buildings of downtown Vancouver, which, as you all know, is a gorgeous city. At 1231, by the way, is St. Louis car in 1912. 1207, I said, I should have said BCER built that in 1905. 1231 is St. Louis, 1912. So it's just a shame that we can't keep some of these running. Well, so we didn't get our intermission. Sorry about that, if anybody needed. But anyway, we've had it. The program's over. Tears in our eyes. This is the Winnipeg streetcar at the end of service there. That's where our program here now tonight is finished. So I'll turn it back then to Bob.
Right.
Okay. I don't.
Okay.
You don't really have to do anything?
No, we'll see what they say.
Yeah, you can unshare. You can.
Oh, yeah, very well. Yeah, au revoir. See you soon. Yeah, in French and English.
And I'll stop the share now. Thanks.
Okay. So it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ray, and your presentation was very concise and compact. So really didn't need an intermission because you were really about 70 minutes. So before we go into questions, just a reminder again: the next meeting is on Friday, June 16th. Harvey Lehner will be our featured speaker and will take us through a journey throughout North America. I think there's some European slides too, but it's a journey taken by rail historian Ralph Cantos. They are both longtime residents of the Los Angeles area. Ralph Cantos was a close friend of the late John Pappas. So with that, if any of you have questions, please feel free to shoot them at Ray. Just for the benefit of everyone and for the recording, please identify yourself when you talk, because there are 4 panels here. All right, go ahead.
Ray, Mike Glicken, I've seen it twice and I want to see it a 3rd time. Just a wonderful presentation.
And this will be recorded again for those who missed it. You can tell your friends it will be recorded. And I did get one of our Canadian friends, Mario, who's online, and he answered one of the questions about what bridge into downtown Montreal. So thank you, Mario.
Good, okay. Well, if you want to send an email to me, that's fine, or to.
Okay, that's great.
To
That's
either
great.
the CRA address or to Bob, and they'll forward it to me. That's good, or I'll give you
Right.
the email address. That's no problem.
I will post your email address in the
Okay, fine.
chat.
Okay, well then I'll see you all in Portland and Seattle.
That's right. Well, maybe. So are there any questions from the assembled group before we let Ray go for the evening? You're getting a lot of very nice comments. Ray, if you watch this on another day, you'll be able to see the Zoom comments.
Oh, okay.
You need to have Ray do more shows. He has great stuff.
Walter Zulik just asked, where was the Montreal and Southern County Station in Montreal? It was
Right.
downtown, I think near McGill University, someplace on Uville Street. Does that, some of the others may know that better than I did. It wasn't far in the city though. It was very just off block or two off the river. But we had a long process to get to the river bridge.
I'm just putting your email
Okay.
address.
Okay, I see. Harvey, thank you. Now, Harvey's got his picture showing on there.
right.
Right, M and C. Oh, so someone just answered the question. Mario, who lives in Montreal, the M and SC station in downtown Montreal
Yeah,
was
Walter,
McGill
yeah,
Street
yeah.
at Wellington. Thank you, Mario.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Any other questions or comments? Going once?
I enjoyed doing it.
Eric,
Yeah.
Eric Allen, I have a quick question. Were all of these lines 600 volt DC and standard gauge?
Oh, I know, John. Yeah.
Were all the lines 600 volt and standard gauge? No.
Wait a minute, I missed something there.
Were all the lines 600 volts and standard gauge?
They shifted power a couple of times.
Yeah,
A
right.
couple of them, yeah. So,
Okay.
anyhow,
Any other questions? Going, Mike Schiffer says, terrific as always, Ray. Thank you. So,
okay, my pleasure. Glad to do it. And I'll be looking forward to the next program myself, because I'll be on Zoom with Harvey, watching Harvey.
great. All right. Going once,
Going twice.
going twice. Ray, once again, thank you so much. It
You're
was
welcome.
great. And thank you, John
and
Nicholson and John Asplund
Yeah,
and
yeah.
CAM team behind Ray for facilitating it and make it so smooth. Yeah, please show your faces for everyone.
All
So
right.
we
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Everybody-
We'll see you later.
applause. So, all right, take care, everyone. Have a good
Okay,
weekend. See
bye-bye.
you June 16th.
All right.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night.